Hello there, good to see you again. Sorry it's been a while, but been busy doing tax returns. And remember all that stuff about 8 weeks ago with PPP and loan forgiveness and how that will work? Forget about it. There's something brand new. If you received a loan, I'm sure you're kind of keeping track of it, but the House and Senate both passed the bill this week in the last few days. That's called the Paycheck Protection Flexibility Act, and it's to help tweak areas of PPP loan forgiveness that were really going to hamstring a lot of businesses. And so I think overall the bill is really good. It's very helpful for most businesses. So I was just going to run through with you kind of quickly the tweaks and how those may impact you. First and foremost, if you're a current PPP borrower, so if you've already gotten your loan before this week, you're now going to be able to choose to extend the 8-week window, 8-week period to get those covered costs in there if you wish. You can extend it to 24 weeks now. So it's going to go from 8 weeks to 24 weeks if you need more time to be able to spend the money that they gave you for payroll costs and the other things. So that's a big help. It's going to help it's going to help most people, but especially it'll help those businesses that have been either closed for a while due to state regulations or have been at not maximum capacity, like restaurants and things like that. So this is going to be really helpful to help you have more time to spend that money that you received. New borrowers, if you haven't received one yet, they're still accepting applications for PPP. So you're going to have the new ones are going to have 24 weeks to get those costs in. The next tweak is in the requirement for the percentage amount of that loan to be paid on payroll costs, to be spent on payroll costs. In the original CARES Act, that percentage was 75%. So if you received a $100,000 loan, at least $75,000 of that was to be spent on the quote payroll costs, which there are a number of things that go into payroll costs. It would to be spent on that. The other 25% could have been spent or can be spent on the other 4 or 5 items that are specifically laid out in the Act. And if you did not hit that 75%, then there was a scale coming down on, not all of the loan would be forgiven at that point. They would kind of scale it down. Well, now that's been tweaked from 75% to 60%. So now 60% of your total loan will need to be spent on the payroll costs, and as opposed to 75%. The big thing about it is the way they wrote this act is that there's no scale. If you don't hit 60% as the bill is currently written, none of the loan will be forgiven. So it's a cliff. If you don't hit the 60, you're going to have to pay the full $100,000 back. But if you can get to that 60% mark, then that will not prevent you from being able to have the loan forgiven. Another tweak had to do with full-time equivalent employees. If your full-time equivalent, there's a calculation that goes in there, and if your full-time equivalents had fallen below a certain percentage of what they were at February 15th, which was their date prior to the pandemic, you had to get those levels back up by your 8-week period or by June 30th. And if you did, then that wouldn't count against you. It wouldn't hurt you in the forgiveness calculation. Well, now, if you're using a 24-week period, it's giving you more time. If you had to reduce the workforce, it's giving you more time to get those employees back or some employees back. And at the latest, it has to be by December 31st, 24 weeks or December 31st. And then with the full-time equivalency employees, in the original CARES Act, there are about 4 exceptions that if your personnel has dropped below a certain percentage, it would hurt your forgiveness percentage amounts unless it met 3 or 4 exceptions. And they added a couple of others in this new act this week. One is if you let somebody go and you could not find a qualified employee to hire within the time period, that's going to be an exception. And then also, if you're unable to restore business operations to the February 15th level, so pre-pandemic level, and that's due to a COVID-related operating restriction. So again, think restaurants, barbershops, those types of things. If the hindrances of those prevent you being able to get your employees back up to that number, then there's going to be an exception there that won't hurt the loan forgiveness. Another big thing is that now borrowers, people who get the loan now, any portion that is not forgiven that remains a loan at the end of the window cover at the end of the period, rather than having a 2-year payback, there's going to be a 5-year payback. And current PPP borrowers will be able to negotiate with their bank and could potentially receive a longer term. So rather than having to pay it back in 2 years, you could potentially pay it back in 5 if you and your bank can come to that agreement. So that is now being allowed with this act. And then the final thing is that when the CARES Act passed, if you did not have a PPP loan, one of the ways that the act allowed businesses to improve their cash flow was that they could hold the employer portion of Social Security match for the employees and not paying in on their 941 tax payments. And they could defer paying that 6.2% for Social Security, the employer's portion. They could defer paying that in, and they could pay 50% of it in at December 31 of 2021 and the other 50% at December 31, 2022. If you have a PPP loan, you could not do that. You had to remit the employee. You always have to remit the withholding portion from your employee, but if you had a PPP loan, you had to remit your employer's portion as well. You couldn't defer that payment. Well, this Flexibility Act now allows those businesses with PPP loans to also defer the 6.2% Social Security matching for the employer's portion. So now, even with a PPP loan, the employer can now defer that payment until 2021 and then 2022 as well. So it's another way to help businesses retain cash and help with operations. So those were the things that passed in the act this week. It's still yet to be signed by the president, but all indications are that he's going to sign that, unless that's happened today and I missed it. He's going to sign it, and so it'll become law. So again, let us know, call us, email us when you have, because you're going to have questions on this. We'll help you get through it. And again, today is June the 4th, June the 5th. So as things have happened in the PPP world in the last few months, all the things I just talked about are good as of today. Who knows what happens next week? But until then, we'll see you later. Thank you.